Hello and welcome. My name is Greg Klein with Hayes Financial Group. What's been a very difficult year, 2020 in general, a volatile year in the stock market. It's timely to finish up the year with a presentation on our emotions and behaviors and how they affect what we do with our investments and our retirement. In this presentation, you see the agenda across the top. We'll work through things like procrastination, loss aversion, emotions, setting reference points with our accounts. You have my contact information right there on this slide. You'll have it in full at the end. And so without further ado, let's get going. Our first topic is procrastination, and this creeps into all aspects of our lives, but especially with our retirement accounts and how retirement accounts today are set up, being that they're defined contribution or employee directed retirement accounts. And when we have this flexibility or this responsibility over our retirement, this poses new challenges to us and faces us with a lot of decisions, emotionally charged decisions, like planning our financial future. So we can become a little bit irrational with our decision making. We can just put this off and procrastinate as a way to deal with these complex decisions. So we'll talk through these behaviors like procrastination and some of these mental shortcuts that we use to deal with these behaviors. But the biggest one is procrastination. If you're an inexperienced investor, it can be easiest just to put this off and fall into procrastination. We don't always prioritize things that are good for us, like saving for retirement, and so we often procrastinate. And this is this human tendency to not take action or inertia, to remain unchanged, prefer the status quo. You see my little icon that I put on this slide with an apple tree. If you think of the apple hanging in the apple tree, it just sits there in the tree. It's not gonna come down unless you shake the tree, a wind blows it down, or you go and pull it from the tree. And so that's that idea of inertia. And if the status quo for you is not saving for retirement, then you're going to need some sort of nudge or something to help beat that procrastination and get you to save for your retirement. And this inertia can be due to lack of knowledge about your retirement plan and its benefits. Can also be due just simply to lack of willpower. You got a lot of other things going on in your life. But these are powerful behaviors and they can leave you on the sidelines not saving for retirement. So this is what we want you to avoid. We want you to understand this. If you're aware of it, then maybe you can combat it and overcome this inertia. Take some action with your retirement savings. I like this model that you see on the slide. It's from a researcher out of Stanford University, Dr. Fogg, and this behavior model. It illustrates how our procrastination, our lack of motivation, it means that we need to make things that we'll say as easy as possible to do them. You see the motivation on that y-axis on the left. If your motivation is low, you don't like money, you don't like thinking about retirement savings, your motivation is low, then we go over to the right, that action line. To be on that action line, we need to make it as easy as possible for you. And I understand that there are things that you're much more motivated to do. Retirement planning is probably not high up on that list. You'd much rather just unwind, watch some sports, watch funny cat videos online, pretty much anything else. So if your motivation's low, you got to make it as easy as possible for yourself. That's why we are here for you. Reach out for help. If it's easier to have somebody hold your hand and help you with your retirement savings account, do that. But making things easy, even going as far as making things automated so you don't have to think about it at all, that's as easy as possible. Then you're not going to have to be highly motivated to take action. A major cause of procrastination or that inertia, just sticking with the status quo, is this idea of choice overload. And when you're looking at your retirement plan, you might succumb to choice overload because you're looking at all these decisions. Am I eligible? Should I enroll? How much should I save? Am I on track? Should I do pre-tax or Roth? Before you even get to the investments, your head might be exploding with all these choices that you have to make. We can very quickly get to that point of choice overload. So a lot of employees suffer from choice overload, and then it'll tie into another one of our points that we're going to get to, which is loss aversion. Then you're afraid of making the wrong decision. So, I'll go back to that model that we just saw a moment ago. If your motivation is low, you look at all these choices and it just makes you not want to do anything. You need to make it as easy as possible. I'll talk about the easy options that are available in your plan, or automating things again so that you don't have to make all these choices, just to make it super simple, and then action is much, much easier to take. This brings us to our first idea or suggestion, and that's to make a tiny change. When I work with retirement savers all the time, they want to make huge changes. They feel like they know they're maybe not on track, and so they want to double their savings. They want to go and change everything in their account. But I would suggest just make a tiny change. It's much easier to make a small change and then build on that. Fogg, the professor that I mentioned before, the Stanford researcher, he talks about forming a habit that is like growing a plant. And they say with growing a plant, a tiny plant, you start with that small thing, that seed, find a good spot for it, and then nourish it so its roots get established and it grows and thrives. And with these tiny behavioral changes or these tiny habits, they'll form quickly and easily. And then, as I mentioned, you can build on those. So how we apply this to your retirement account is you start with a tiny behavior, find a good spot in your routine for this tiny behavior. Maybe it's right now. You're listening to this presentation. Go check in on your retirement account. Make that change that you know you've needed to do forever. I'll repeat this again later, but I recommend to people that you pick a time in the year that's good for you. We're coming up on a new year. At the beginning of the year, January, a lot of people look at their finances. Do it then. Do it when you get a pay increase each year. Do it on your birthday. Do it on your work anniversary. Whatever works for you, but find the time to, give that tiny behavior some light, some water, like that tiny plant, so that you can help it grow. And you might not be perfect, so don't beat yourself up if you don't always stick to this, but if you make it a small change, it's going to be easier. It can be as little as just saving 1% more, or maybe even logging into your account. You can't get into your account, and that's a hurdle. So just log into your account. You don't even have to make a change, but make sure that you can get access to your account. Know where your money's invested. That's another good one. A lot of people have no idea where their money's invested. Just learn where it's invested, and then maybe you can change it down the road or figure out where exactly it needs to be, but at least know where you sit at the time being. And then you can build on that make it a habit, and then do that however it works for you. Every year, do something new, build on that tiny habit. If it's every month, if it's every quarter, whatever works for you. But use this idea of tiny changes or tiny habits to become a better retirement saver. Another emotion we feel and reason for putting off making a choice is this idea of loss aversion, because we don't want to make the wrong decision. And this always makes me think of a study where they would ask people, they would flip a coin and they would say, if you win, you get $200. If you lose, you have to pay the house $100, and would ask people if they'd accept that bet. And most people would decline. And that ties into this idea that losses hurt, twice as much as the gains, even though with a coin toss, you have a 50-50 chance of making $200, so winning twice as much as you'd have to potentially pay. It doesn't matter. The idea of losing that $100 is just too much to handle. And so losses tend to stick in our memories much longer. They stay there more vividly than the gains. People can remember very clearly those difficult times in the market, but they don't always remember the good times. So fear of making that bad choice, that can cause you to put off making a decision. And then we use some mental shortcuts to deal with this that I'll talk about and want you to be aware of. One of the shortcuts that we use for dealing with difficult decisions, like enrolling in your retirement plan and picking investments, is this idea of chasing the hot performer. So you want to deal with that loss aversion, the idea that you might make the wrong decision by investing in what's hot and what's doing well right now. And this happens all the time when people go to enroll in their retirement account. They'll look at a list of funds like you see on this slide. They don't know the difference between fund A, B, C, D, E. And what they'll do is they'll look and see, oh, this fund's been doing the best. I'll put my money in that fund. That may or may not be the right investment for that person and their situation and their the moment in their life where they are in their time horizon. So this is, and how can you blame anyone? I mean, I think we all want to invest in winners. I mean, it's totally understandable. It's human nature, but chasing the hot performer, can be dangerous. It is a way to deal with these complex decisions that we have to make with our retirement account, but there's better ways and easier ways to deal with this in your retirement account that we'll touch on. And that brings us to our second suggestion. That's to try not to dwell too much on the negative or the downside. As I mentioned at the very beginning, I know 2020 has been difficult. It's been a crazy year for the stock market. So that fear of loss, that loss aversion can be very present, but it can be detrimental. And so if you need to reach out for help. That's what we're here for. You have advisors on your retirement plan that help your employer, that can help you as a participant in the retirement plan. So reach out, and you'll get my contact information again at the end. So reach out with questions and some of these steps you can take to mitigate some of that loss aversion, like focusing on the positive, diversifying, and then reaching out for help that we'll take a look at. Diversification helps you to not chase the hot performer. Diversification, again, is that idea of spreading your money out so that not all your eggs are in one basket. There's a reason why you have a lot of different investments available in your employer-sponsored retirement plan so that you diversify, because you never know when one of these particular investments is going to be the hot performer or be a very cold type of investment and not a top performer. This chart illustrates that for you. It just shows you, but a decade of performance. The colored square at the top is the best performer. Down at the bottom of each column is the worst performer for the year. Take a look at year to date, just as an example. I mean, you see the bottom performer year to date is that kind of light blue color. But that area was doing better than average last year. So maybe if you had picked that as an investment, you thought, well, this is good. I'll put my money here. Not knowing that 2020 was going to be the way it is, and now it's one of the worst performers. So you want to diversify, spread your money out. If you look at the colored squares on this chart, track the yellow boxes. That's a diversified portfolio, and you can see how it hovers more around the middle. So that diversification will help control some of that loss aversion, because you're going to be spreading your money out and you're not going to be tempted to do things like chase a hot performer. Also important to remember when you're worried about making the wrong decision or that loss aversion with your investments is that the stock market is up more than it is down. You can see the distribution of performance on this chart, and all the years to the right of that green line are years where the market was up, And to the left are years where the market was down, and you'll see there are many more years to the right of that line than to the left. 2020, with all that has happened this year, will almost certainly be to the right of that line and be a positive year in the stock market, if you can believe it. So just remember that historically speaking, the stock market is up more than it is down. We focus too much on the losses, those hurt more than the gains, remember? And so when you're feeling that, when you're feeling like this loss is just like the worst thing that's ever happened, remember that as long as time permits, the market will recover for you and the market will be up more than it is down and you'll be okay. And maybe that will help you deal with those emotions and then some of the behaviors that stem from those emotions. Emotional investing is our third segment. And a key finding of behavioral economists is that people will often act irrationally when making financial decisions because our emotions track the market perfectly. And so if you look at that wheel on this slide, when you're investing your hard-earned dollars for retirement, it can be very emotional. And that you go through this emotional roller coaster, and you see that the times where you're very excited, feeling good, is when the market is up at the top, when the market's high. And that's often when investors will buy. They'll feel confident and they'll buy. Then, in turn, when the market drops, you're down at the bottom, prices are low. That's when investors feel nervous and the fear overwhelms them and they look to sell their investments. But if you follow your emotions too closely, you'll see that your emotions are telling you to do the opposite of what you want to do. If your emotions are always telling you to buy when prices are high and sell when prices are low, that's not how you're going to be successful with your retirement savings. So you have to understand this and work with your emotions and either make it simple to, kind of tune out these emotions or, check yourself. If you think you're going to make this sort of change, understand what you're doing, and then maybe make that extra call and reach out for help so you don't make this sort of error with your retirement savings. This slide hurts every time I look at it because as a result of the overly emotional investing, we see that the average investor lags behind the stock market in general. So what you see on the slide, the S&P 500, that's basically the US stock market. And then you have some blended portfolios like 60-40 or 40-60, where it's high risk, low risk, bonds, inflation. So that one on the far right is just the rising cost of living. And then you get into the average investor. So how has the average investor performed over the last 20 years? And you see they lag behind the stock market in general by, more than, well, or less than half the return of the stock market. If they had just stuck with a standard investment in the US stock market, they would have done, more than twice as good as they did, but it's because those emotions take over. The average investor moves money into or out of their investments at the wrong time and hurts their overall performance. So we see it in the numbers. We don't want that to happen to you. That's why we're bringing this to your attention, and that's why we say use investment options that will allow you to avoid this or reach out for help. We all understand the stock market goes up and down each day, it has these wild swings. So checking in on your account and seeing how these swings in the market affect the bottom line of your retirement savings account, they can cause you to second guess your strategy. And so checking in on your investments daily can lead to unnecessary stress and cause you to maybe make some changes that set you back with your progress towards achieving your retirement savings goals. You see on this slide, the more frequently you check, the more likely you are to see negative returns. And it makes sense because if you're checking all the time, you're going to see more of those daily dips. So it's important to monitor your investments, but if you know that it drives you crazy when you see that you lose money in your account, maybe don't check it quite as often because you see if you're checking just once a year, once every quarter, you're far less likely to see those negative returns that might cause you to stray from your strategy. Taking advantage of the easy-to-use investment options to help you manage your retirement account, control your emotions, deal with the volatility in the stock market. That's our third suggestion to deal with your emotions. Just use the options that are there for you, that are monitored by the advisor for your plan, like Hayes Financial Group, your employer. They're there for a reason. So we'll discuss those in a little bit more detail. Depending on your plan, you will have either a managed portfolio type of investment that has like a specific risk level, moderate, aggressive, conservative, that sort of thing, or a target date fund based on your age. And both of these options will allow you to easily pick a diversified portfolio that is going to be managed for you. They're great options for inexperienced investors or people that just don't have the time, interest, monitoring their investments very closely, and those overly emotional investors, because a managed portfolio, a target date fund, they'll help you control those emotions, because you can kind of set it and forget it. So definitely look to those to help deal with those actions that we take to work through our complex emotions, like chasing hot performers. Options like a managed portfolio or a target date fund help control emotions and help you control what I call simple or naive diversification. Because as I mentioned in this presentation, we have these mental shortcuts to deal with these complex decisions. Investing is a very difficult decision for many people. And if you don't go with one of the easy options in your plan, you might do something like this simple diversification, where you see, okay, there are basically 4 different types of investments: cash, bonds, US and international stocks. Well, better than having all my eggs in one basket. I'll put 25% in each of those buckets. And that's great. That is a mental shortcut that helps you. That's better than not diversifying at all, but it's not the greatest form of diversification. It is just that. It is a shortcut. So rather than go to the lengths of diversifying on your own and perhaps not doing a good job of it, it would be better just to use one of those easy options that are available to you. As I mentioned, they're in your plan for a very specific reason. So use those options like managed portfolio, target date funds. They'll do a better job of diversifying for you. And then it's way down on that scale of motivation. You don't need a lot of motivation. It's super simple. Pick one of those investments and then you're good with your diversification. Everyone listening to this presentation, I'm sure, is a better than average driver, better than average intelligence, better than average looking, because no one wants to be average, right? And the same holds true for investments or investors that are self-directed. And you can see on this slide that if you compare how investors invest in their retirement to what their target allocation should be for their age, based on something like a target date fund, you'll see the younger investors tend to be too conservative, and then as you get older, closer to retirement, they're kind of on both ends of the spectrum, where a lot of people are too conservative or too aggressive, and um, you know don't find that sweet spot right in the middle where they should be. And so it's just another plug for using those easy to use investments in your plan. They can help you deal with all of those emotions, all of those shortcuts that we use to try to work our way through our behaviors and deal with things like loss aversion, emotional investing, and this naive diversification that we use to deal with things like that. So your employer and your retirement plan have done the research for you, found the right fit for your plan, like a portfolio or a target date fund. And so I would never want to call you average, but in this case, it's okay to be average. It's okay to use an appropriate investment that's been set up for someone of your risk tolerance or your age and your time horizon. And it can be far more beneficial than trying to go it on your own as a self-directed investor, because you will succumb to some of those shortcuts and some of those emotions and behaviors that can be negative in terms of your overall retirement plan performance. Lastly, following our suggestion and going with one of the easy to use investment options in your plan will help you control your emotion. And an advantage that comes out of this is continuing to put money into your retirement account, not stopping your contributions. Because sticking with your strategy, continuing to contribute, and if having a managed investment like a portfolio or a target date fund helps you do that, it'll help you to keep investing in your retirement account through thick and thin, because depositing money into your account when the market is low and the market is suffering a little bit is when you buy in low. That's illustrated on this chart. They also call this dollar cost averaging. It's just that idea of when things are on sale, when prices are low, you want to buy more. And you'll see when prices are low, that's the green bars on this slide. And so when the green bars are shorter, the blue bars are longer. That's because when prices are low, things are on sale, we're going to stock up and buy more of that. That's what happens as long as you keep contributing in your retirement account. If you stop contributing for whatever reason, because your emotions take control, then you're not going to benefit from this dollar cost averaging. We want you to continue investing during the difficult times because that's when you can get investments on sale, and that's going to help your overall performance. The last segment is reference points, and this is looking at those numbers that we use as mental shortcuts for dealing with how much we save. And we want to talk about setting the right reference points with your retirement account. Most employees spend very little time determining how much they should save for retirement. It's a matter of just a few seconds. It's probably as simple as just relying on one of these mental shortcuts for setting a reference point, saying, I'm automatically enrolled in my plan at 3%, so that's what I'm going to save. Or to get the full employer match, I need to save 5 or 6%, so that's what I'm going to do. Or I like nice round numbers like 5 or 10%. What we want you to understand is why you save what you save. Yep, 5% might sound like a nice round number, but is that really enough to help you accomplish your goals? And if you're saving 5%, should you wait until you can jump up to 10% to make a change? I would argue no. I would say getting to 6 and 7, 8, working your way up is much better. So understand what reference point you're using and make sure that it's an appropriate reference point to help you accomplish your goals. This leads us to our last suggestion, which is setting the right reference point. Saving a little bit more has a big impact. Don't have a static reference point. So if you're enrolled automatically, your plan at 3%, or you start with 5%, don't stop there. Always be increasing. And I know I mentioned this earlier in the presentation about those tiny habits. Pick that time when it's right for you to water that little plant and that tiny habit to help it grow. If it's coming up here in January, your birthday, the time you get a raise during the year, your work anniversary, pick that time, or right now, just do it right now. But automate your changes if you can, because it's important not to be at those static reference points. You can see on this chart, if you start at 3%, because that's how you're automatically put into your retirement plan, and you stay there, what sort of difference it makes. We're talking about tens of thousands of extra dollars for your retirement. If you had just formed a tiny habit to increase that 1% each year to get up to a higher number like 10, 11, 12%, which is where you probably need to be on track to accomplish your retirement savings goals. And so understand these reference points. If you're saving 5%, understand why that is, and understand that might not be where you can just sit forever. You might need to save more, and doing that sooner rather than later is going to be key. As I said from the very beginning, to automating this. If you can automate this in your plan, that much better, because there's no work involved with that. Get on those automatic increases to set your savings higher and higher as you go along, and you'll be in a much better situation when you get to retirement. Thank you for your time and attention. We greatly appreciate you joining us, excuse me, for this video. You can reach out to me. My phone number, email is on the slide. Our website, the Calendly link. If you want to set up an appointment outside of listening to this presentation to speak with me, feel free to use that. But hopefully you learned a little bit about yourself and these behaviors, shortcuts that we take to deal with these behaviors when we're confronting complex situations, such as dealing with our retirement savings, procrastination, loss aversion, emotions, setting these reference points so that you have a better understanding of what you're doing when you're working with your retirement account. And please, again, reach out if you need additional assistance. We're always here for you. So take lots of care, and we'll talk to you in future presentations.